So my title for today is In the Hour of Trouble. It's not my own. I stole it from one of the commentaries that I was following. But the thing is, I think that in the hour of trouble, yes, but also let's carry it further, because more, indeed, in every hour of the whole of our lives. Why should we limit it only to one particular moment or situation? And so in every moment of our life, the significance of this is perfectly clear from what we see in the particular gospel here today. In the hour of the disciples' need, Jesus came to them. And when the wind was contrary and life was a struggle, Jesus was there to help, as he is always, even though sometimes we forget that or don't notice it. So no sooner had a need arisen than Jesus was there to help and to save them right at their very particular moment that they needed him the most. Well, in life, of course, the wind is often contrary. It does this or it does that or it does the other thing. There are times maybe when we're up against it and life is a desperate struggle with ourselves. We know that life comes in different phases at different times. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, sometimes it's a little tough, and sometimes it's great. So it depends on our circumstances, with our temptations, with our sorrows, and with our decisions. At such a time, there's no need to struggle alone, because indeed, at each and every stage, Jesus comes. He comes to us across the storms of our life, whatever it may be, just as he's there in the good times with us as well. And so he comes with his hand stretched out, just as he did to Peter today, to save us. And with his calm, clear voice, bidding us take heart and have no fear. One of the translations that I like very much of this particular gospel today is the one that says, when Jesus gets into the boat, he raised up his hand and he called the storm to calm. And what I like is what follows is, and complete calm ensued. Complete calm. As much as there had been a severe storm and the waves coming up over the boat, now the water was as clear as glass because Jesus was present. And so with his calm, clear voice, bidding us to take heart and to have no fear. And so when we continue then, in any event, far more certainly than the story that we see today about what Jesus did just at once in that particular time, way far off in Palestine, it wasn't only a one-time event, but rather it is the sign and the symbol of what he always does for his people. And we are his people, so he does the same thing for us in our time of need as well. So when the wind is contrary and we're in danger and being overwhelmed by the storms of life, truly the Lord is there, as the Lord is there always. I will never leave you orphaned. I am with you always. Have no fear. So as we continue looking at this then, we see and learn a little bit more about Peter's character. And what we see in Peter's character, we can see in our own character as well. And so we have sort of Peter and ourselves and Peter. So we can learn from him and his character, just as we can learn from each other and how we handle the various storms or situations of our life. And so Peter was given to acting upon impulse and without thinking of what he was doing. There was a lot of emotion and kind of almost like knee-jerk reaction to things without stopping to think for a moment. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with feelings and emotions as long as we keep them surrendered to the Lord and seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So for Peter, it was his mistake that again and again he always acted without fully taking a look at things, without fully facing what exactly is this situation that I'm faced here today at this particular moment, and without counting the cost. Because in each particular situation, there is going to be some kind of a cost. If we don't consider that and we jump only on the feelings, that's when we're going to run into more of the problems. And so Peter was to do exactly the same when, for example, he affirmed undying. He says, I love you, Lord. He claims this undying and unshakable loyalty to Jesus. letting him know for sure that he loves him very much. And then he later turns around and he denies the Lord's name. You know, Peter, you know him. You know, no, who Jesus? No, never met, have no idea who that is. And so yet there are worse sins than that, bad enough as that may have been, because Peter's whole trouble was that he was ruled by his heart. Now again, there's a lot coming from our heart that can help us in our time of need and in our days and in our life anyway. However, he might sometimes fail, and his heart was always in the right place. That's one of the important things about his character. Although he was prone to, sort of say one thing and a couple of minutes later he might do the opposite, but always within himself, his heart was in the right place. And the instinct of his heart was always love. So it wasn't that, that he was a bad guy and that you couldn't trust him. It's just that that's the way that he expressed himself. He was prone to the impulses and the instincts that came in the flash of a moment. And so because Peter acted on impulse, he often failed. And because of that, he came to grief, because it was always Jesus' insistence that we should look, first of all, take a look at the situation, whatever it may be, in all its bleak grimness before deciding what to do. And so a great deal of our Christian failure, or the different various failures that we're faced with in life, sometimes can be due to acting in an emotional moment without counting the cost. And that's part of life. But it's just to understand that in those particular moments, we need to maybe, if we can, try to stop for a moment and turn to Jesus more deeply than we have at another time in our lives, to take a look at, well, what's actually going on here? And then to try to take the appropriate action. But for Peter never finally failed. In the end, he was victorious, because he always, in the moment of his failure, he always clutched at Jesus. He always turned to the Lord. He always sought the Lord. And so the wonderful thing about him is that every time he fell, he rose again. Certainly that must have been for him true, and that even his failure brought him closer and closer to Jesus. Sometimes in those moments where we have those difficulties, they are good moments to help to bring us closer to the Lord as well, as they did for Peter. And so it has been well said, a saint is not a person who never fails, but rather a saint is someone who gets up and goes on again every time that we fall. Peter's failure was only made him love Jesus Christ the more. So again, we see in his character, as we can see in our own character, the reality of who we are as human beings. We say one thing, but another thing happens. Something happens, we act in one way. Another time, the same thing happens, and we act in a different way. And so the verses, now I think this is sort of the key point. The verses, however, they finish with another very great, very important and loving moment of power of the grace of love. There is this permanent truth that when Jesus got into the boat, the wind stopped. He raised his hand, commanded the storm to stop, and so it did. So the great truth that came from that, imagine what they were experiencing when the boat was bouncing all over the place with the waves coming over the side, and all of a sudden Jesus raises, speaks, and there's complete calm. So what happens then is where we see, as the disciples saw, that wherever Jesus Christ is, the wildest storms become a calm. As long as Jesus is there, as long as Jesus is present, as long as we turn to him and call upon him, he's there anyway already. It's just to recognize his presence in our lives. And so anytime maybe when our heart is distressed or agitated or bothered with some difficulty of life, the idea is to put the cross into the center, to help to move into the middle of that particular situation, to help to keep it steady, to keep us steady, to keep us focused on the Lord. In every time of storm, the stress, the presence of Jesus, and the love which flows from the cross brings peace and serenity and calm. And again, it is that complete calm that ensues, that complete calm that we enter into when Jesus is there as that part of our life. And so the story then again ends with that confession, the confession of faith. Truly, you are the Son of God. And so the boat then represents the church. The storm is the persecution that the church was to go through in Matthew's community at that particular time. And Jesus appears and challenges Peter. He challenges him to trust him. Peter's afraid. He cries out, "Lord, save me." Jesus, half rebuking, half encouraging, says, "O man of little faith, why did you doubt? What's the problem? I'm here." And so the Lord brings Peter to safety, and all the disciples make this adoring confession, "Truly, you are the Son of God." And so, although it maybe starts out with the storm, it ends with the peace and the grace of Jesus Christ. So there's a storm at sea, there's Peter, there's ourselves. How do we deal with things? What is the storm? Is there a particular storm in our lives? And if so, how do we handle it? Yesterday, I celebrated my 83rd birthday. I made it to 83. Thank you. The reason why I bring that in is to take a look at ourselves. We see Peter, we see how things went for him, but where are we in the various stages of our lives? We're always making choices, always making decisions when we arrive at the gate of 80, just as we continue to do throughout the whole of our lives. The thing is, when we look at it, life, the world, sometimes politics, sometimes our desires, each decade has its own time. Each decade, whatever it is that we are in at a particular in time. The solution then is to make sure that we are in the right place and in the right situation that is appropriate to our decade, and that is at the right time, and we handle it properly. When I thought about being 83, if the Lord decides He wants me to live to 100, that's in 17 years. That's just around the corner. Now, I don't know how many there's going to be, just as none of us knows. But I know I don't have 30 or 40 or 50 years. A few years back, just about 10 years ago, when it was time to renew my passport, you had a decision. You could renew it for 5 years or 10 years. And I figured the age, I was in my 70s, that was that particular decade, and I thought, what do I do? What's 5 years, 10 years? What am I going to save $5 if I. And so I decided to go for 10. I'm going to go for the gold. And so I got it for 10 years. And then I used to tell people, you see this? This is my passport. God can't take me yet. I got a passport taking me for another 10 years before He can do anything. Well, the thing is that I have to check myself now that I am where I am and say, what's important is if I'm in the right boat, everything will be okay. Everything will be as it should be, regardless of how I might feel, regardless of what society may or may not say. And so to quote St. Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11, "When I was a child, I used to talk like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways aside." Dear sisters and brothers, my prayer for you would be to get a good sense, a good grasp, a good grip of what decade are you in, and live it for all it's worth. Go for everything. Go for the gold.